are my filters of my worldview, the filters through which I understand the world outside me and understand myself, because these pillars, these are not things that we've created with awareness. These are things that we have acquired without awareness, but they determine how we relate to our family, our friends, within our culture, or with ourselves. The fact that we're living a climate change, I don't know if you've realized it. Now, literally, it's something you feel on your skin, no? So I was thinking about this. I mean, what can we do? I mean, where is this coming from? I'm not a scientist, and I don't have specific knowledge about the cycles of the earth, but there's something I'm aware of, that wherever there's interaction, inevitably there's transformation, because there's our way of living that doesn't seem very healthy. Mostly, if we go to look, for example, if we talk about biodiversity is being lost in a frightening way. Some time ago, I don't remember who I was talking to, but they were talking about the quantity of vegetables that are edible, and and how many of those do we actually use? This is frightening. We've managed as a society to take an enormous wealth of nature. There's an enormous quantity of pulses, of fruits, of vegetables, even just corns, the different varieties of corns, for example, like 15 different varieties of corn. And today, what do we have? What do we eat? I think you can use just two hands. Carrots, zucchini, potatoes, eggplants. These first four, let's just think about these four. How many varieties of these do we eat? Have you ever seen black carrots? They're good. How many varieties of zucchinis or potatoes, of tomatoes? But we have one variety, and if we look at what we buy for vegetables, if we find something a little different, then we're lucky. So normally, I mean, we just eat those few things, and then we complain about getting sick. This is not the subject of today either, but I gave the idea, right? So there's an enormous variety, and to simplify things, to optimize the processes, let's say. Why is there so much variety in nature? Because the world is, how can we say, is uncertain. And anything can happen. And if you have one variety and something happens to that variety, that's over. So the varieties, having variety is very important. But my point is that when we look around, we've gotten to a level of just destruction of biodiversity. The other day I heard that when we talk about the main forests, how many square meters of primary forest is it has remained in Europe. Zero. And it seemed like they went to look in the Eastern Europe. So a primary forest means a forest that was never touched by man or never destroyed. And some say it was the fault of Romans. No. When did we destroyed instead most of this primary forest in Europe in the last 200 years. Why? Now we'll get to the answer in my opinion. The animal realm, for example. What makes up the animal realm? Okay. Let's leave human beings aside. We're, in my opinion, we're one of the least intelligent species within. We need to define intelligence, but if a species that destroys its own habitat, it doesn't seem intelligent to me. So I don't remember the actual numbers, but something about like more than 90% of animals are pigs, chickens, hens, cows, and they're all in concentration camps. If we look at the actual animals that exist on Earth today, and this is not the subject of today either. But why? A short time ago, I was in Brazil. I was in the city of Búzios, which is near Rio de Janeiro. We have a center there, and a friend took me out on a boat. It's a small boat, and at a certain point, he took me somewhere where I had never been. A beach that was a little bit hidden, has a house, and he said, "You see this place? This is a place where, when Brazil abolished slavery, this is where ships came with slaves in a clandestine way, in a secret way. So slavery continued. If I remember well, it was abolished in 1889. I mean, it seems like yesterday, but then it was kept in a secret way for a while. And something just clicked within. I asked myself, but the people from that time who had slaves at home, were they so bad? Because if you think today, someone says, I have slaves at home. I bought a slave at the market last week. What would you say about someone like that? You're horrible. How can you do something like that? It's horrible. Insensitive. If at a certain point, no, hold on, come here. Let me call my slave. It's just it's impossible for us to understand something like that. But 100 years ago, it was quite common in many parts of Europe to have slaves. I mean, all of those people, I mean, everyone who had a slave was terrible. Would we say that they were all horrible, insensitive people? No, what happened is that these people lived in a context where, and that was part of the worldview, and the so-called normalcy. It's a very strange concept. It's normalcy. Someone asks sometimes, but is it normal for this? What does that mean? Is it normal? Because we have this idea that if it's normal, it's okay. But normal actually means that it means what's common among the majority. And at the time of slavery, for example, I mean, many had slaves, and so it was normal to have slaves. So since it's normal to have slaves, there's nothing wrong with having slaves. And as I was talking about this, my father who was there on the boat with us, he said what happened before, what happened before with the slaves is the same thing that's happening today with animals, with meat. We have our worldview. Let's try to understand where this all comes from. I'm going to talk about something that is not my forte, and I'll certainly make some mistakes, but I'll try to give you the idea. About 10,000 years ago, it said that human beings started the process of agriculture, and up before agriculture, what did humans do? They hunted. They would go, they were hunters and gatherers, and they were nomads. They would go from one place to another, looking for fruit, hunting, and looking for nuts. At a certain point, they learn how to cultivate the soil. So a great revolution happened in human history. So those who moved all the time as nomads became sedentary. And I don't know how often we talk about this, but I understood that with this change from nomadic lifestyle, this hunter-gatherer to agriculture, there was the worldview changed radically. The cultures, even today, that are hunter-gatherers, nomadic people, they have a worldview that's considered animistic. Animist. It means me as a human being, and you, cow, a tree, whale, dog, we're on the same plane. And I, as a human being, I am part of nature in the same way a mosquito is or a plant is. We're on the same plane. We are part of nature. With the coming of agriculture, humans started abusing earth. To be able to cultivate earth, they needed whose help? Animals' help. And they started seeing that by not needing to go from one place to the other, they started raising animals and killing animals. How many of you have a pet at home? A dog, a cat. Imagine that you take your pet, your little dog, your cat, and you breed them for Christmas dinner. That's a horrible idea. Why? Why? Because there's affection, there's connection. So what happened was, in this process of using animals to work the soil, and in the raising cattle to be able to eat them, this happened together with a worldview change, where the human beings put themselves in a position of superiority and distance from nature. I can't say in all cases, but in most of the cases that I've tried to understand, where man acts with violence towards another, what justifies that violence is a sense of superiority. So, superiority towards, there were actually studies to show that blacks were inferior, or academic studies to show the inferiority of women. This has happened. Animals don't have souls, without getting into discussions about other religions. But there's this attitude of creating distance through a sense of superiority. And we do this in so many cases to say the worth of life, depending on where one is born. Is it the same or different? Why? I mean, the way that we live it in practice, it's different. Why? Because there's a sense of superiority that justifies so many things. Oh, this can't happen to me because I am, and to him, yes, because he is. We have a sense of superiority from a cultural point of view, and the point of view of race, of social standing point of view. And so what happens is this distance, this sense of superiority creates a justification, because someone who is the same as me, could I act violently towards someone who is just like me? Because when I see someone just like me, I see myself in the other, and by seeing myself in someone else, that naturally inhibits any kind of violence towards that person. So how can I act violently towards you? Then I need to not see myself in you, and then I can act violently, and I can justify it using all the illogical logics. You following? So if we observe one aspect through which we have justified abuses, etc., I mean, just look in our history and even in our present. On a social level, are there abuses where a person who is the same as me, I wouldn't allow that person to live a certain situation, but someone different, I do. On talking about race, or a woman, a man, many different contexts. So, but actually, what happens at the end of the day, one knows what's right and wrong, but one justifies by creating distance and sense of superiority in many different ways. And in this process, what we human beings, what we've done along this process is we have distanced ourselves from nature. We don't see ourselves anymore connected to nature. We've gotten to the point where we are not part of nature, but we possess nature. In Buddhist philosophy, there's a point where one asks, more than ask one, it's a phrase of Buddha it's the only one I know that's quite ironic. He says, "Oh, my dear monk, there's baggage and there's the baggage, there's the baggage carrier, and the baggage is body and mind, and the one who carries the baggage is the person. But if I were to ask, do you have a body and mind? Do you have a body? Do you have a mind? Yes. So who's the person who possesses the body and the mind? Because it's very simple. This relationship between the possessor, the one who possesses, the owner, and that which is owned. One characteristic is they can't be of the same nature. They need to be separate. So the one who owns needs to exist separately from that which is owned, because if I can't exist independently from what I own, it doesn't mean that I own it. It means that I'm made of that thing. So do you have a body and mind, or are you made of body and mind? We don't possess body and mind. Where is Lama Michel? Let me point my finger. Beyond body and mind, you're not going to find him. similarly, in the same way, we have this way of we have this idea that we can possess nature, the soil and the land and water and animals. And one of these fixations that humans have is owning things. We have this fixation, don't we? But I ask myself, do I possess nature or am I part of nature? What's the problem? That when I think that I'm possessing nature and natural resources, minerals, animals, plants, the water, air, the insects, any form, everything outside of me can be owned. But at a certain point of other human beings, we said no. At a certain point in our history, but everything else, yes, right? No. What can you not possess? But I don't know. I mean, there's something that's of public domain, but it belongs to someone. And this relationship of believing that we can possess nature, we've created a worldview where nature exists for our benefit at the service of human beings. So everything that we do with nature is justified once it's at the service of man. Just look that most movements to protect nature and the environment, we don't talk about the need to respect nature in and of itself. We talk about its relationship with human beings. We say, this is harmful to humans if we do like this. So to benefit human beings, we need to treat nature better. It's convenient for us. If you play classical music to cows, they'll give a better quality milk. Not that the cows themselves enjoy the music. Am I explaining myself? So what happens is we have this idea where nature exists for us, and wanting or not, these are our filters. And we can change them, but it's difficult because filters are not conceptual, they're deeper. So everything that's around us can be possessed. It belongs to someone. And this is a concept that is relatively new. I mean, private property is a new idea, relatively new. That's another topic. But it's another aspect of the formation of our worldview. So everything that exists around me, animals, plants, water, land, air, whatever it is, just the moon, the planets, the stars, is at the function of human beings to serve our needs. This is one point. This is one filter. The trap here is the other filter that comes right after. What's the definition of economy? And now I heard once from this definition from an economist, and there are others who tell me that it's a little bit outdated. But this classic definition of economy is the science to make it so that it's the science to satisfy the infinite desires of man with finite resources of nature. Let me repeat that. Economy is the science that is there to satisfy the infinite desires of man with the finite resources of nature. And what I liked so much about this definition is that at least it's sincere. So what happens at so we talk about the man's desire is infinite. So at the beginning of the definition, there's a very weak point. How can we believe that we can satisfy something that's infinite? Much less with something that's finite. Because actually the only way to satisfy something that's infinite is something else that's infinite. But it's not possible in any way to satisfy something infinite, and much less with something that's finite. That is not logical. And what's this result of trying to satisfy something infinite with something finite? Because that finite thing at some point finishes. And on the other side, that desire is not satisfied. I mean, the logic is very simple here. And so then we need to recycle. We need to have a sustainable economy because the resources are finite. But we still need to. Consider our desires. I totally agree. We should recycle, but in Brazil we say the hole is lower. A fundamental filter, and this is one of the fundamental causes for our primary problems, is human behavior and against nature, has to do with our projection, and we talked about this last time. When we look at what we consider happiness to be. In the last decades, more and more, we're living on a plane where happiness is determined by pleasure, obtaining pleasure. But when you find yourself in a state of having to put a lot of energy into surviving, then what's your priority? Your priority is surviving. And that means a lot already. When survival is assured, do we stay in a state of security and bliss and satisfaction? Okay, is it enough? My survival is assured. My personal survival, my species survival. No, once our survival is assured, then we go to the next step. Our objective is no longer about survival. And all of us here, I mean, if we talk about an objective to surviving, we wouldn't even understand each other. I mean, that seems absolutely banal to be afraid of surviving, because we have grown up. We have grown up with so much wealth and to well-being that survival seems absolutely guaranteed. But I can assure you that if we didn't have the security of survival, our priorities would change dramatically. But if our survival is assured, then our priorities becomes avoiding suffering and obtaining pleasures. And this translates into getting what I want and avoiding what I don't want. Is that clear? Also because we put our energy mostly in getting what we want and avoiding what we don't want, much more than avoiding what is bad for us and obtaining what is good for us. True, huh? Isn't it? Even avoiding what is bad for us is often very difficult because we like it. So we put on the scale what weighs more for us, what I like or what's good for me. Our tendency is to give more weight to what we like. And this concept of what we like, we also project our happiness onto our sensory pleasures. It's something that is strongly connected to obtaining and experiencing. Just look at our relationship with food. When we go to eat something at home or in the restaurant, and I repeat this again because I hope one day you'll be able to see this. And I just throw out seeds, something that I'm not able to do. So I'm just throwing out seeds, and I'm hoping that someday someone will pick up this idea. And I give this idea without any copyright. Imagine a restaurant where you sit down, you take a menu, and there's not a single dish on the menu. The menu is actually a kind of survey, a questionnaire. And this questionnaire can follow the Ayurvedic or Chinese or Tibetan, any valid healthcare system. And so the questions are about how you're feeling, if you have any kind of pain, or how's your sleep, just to do a very gross level diagnosis. And then the dish that would be best for you comes out. So you don't eat what you like, you eat what it would be good for you. I mean, that seems really logical. But I saw that for myself when I had to stop eating what I like so much, like mozzarella. And when I had to start eating what I needed, at beginning I lived it as if it were a kind of violence against me. There was a feeling of unjust. It was unjust. Everyone can have mozzarella. Why can't I have mozzarella? It seemed unfair. And what happens with this is, but the click that happened for me, I asked myself one day, why do I eat? Do I eat because I like to eat, or do I eat because I need to eat? And with a lot of sincerity, I tell you that I eat because I need to eat. I eat because I need to eat. I try to imagine my life without having to eat. And I think it would be even better. I mean, how much energy do we put into cultivating, buying, cooking, eating, digesting, managing what happens after our digestion, our all sewage systems? I think one of the most precious resources that we have is clean water, and one of the primary functions of clean water today is to push out the result of our breakfast, lunch, or dinner. There's a friend that talked about this. It's just the one sign of our ignorance is that we use this clean water for the sewage. Of course, there are reasons, for sicknesses, etc. But the point is, if we didn't have to eat, life would be easier. So I don't eat because I want. I eat because I need. And if I eat because I need, should I eat what I like or what I need? No, what I need. End of story. And when I had that inner click, it totally changed for me. I could see how in our culture and our way of living, to not be able to do what we want to do is lived like a kind of violence, like taking away a right for something horrible, something unfair, unjust. I don't know if you share my point of view. And I remember this emblematic moment for myself. I was actually in Linate airport, and I was on my way to Holland, and I was waiting for the airplane, and there was a bar, and there was a family. There was a mother, 2 children, and a grandmother. At a certain point, I see this child that starts crying and crying. It seemed like he was, like he had his fingers cut off. He was screaming, and the mother was uncomfortable. And she went to the child and said, "What happened to you? What happened to you? Why are you crying so much?" And then the baby explains, and that's metaphorically, she put herself, bowed down on her knees to ask for forgiveness. Not really, but that's how it seemed. And it was because the child wanted to open up the potato chip bag himself. So he wanted, and he wasn't able. The mother opened it for him. So even at a very young age, 5, 6 years old, his worldview was very, very clear to him that wanting is a right. They acquired from the beginning. We have this idea, to respect someone, we ask them what they want, and we ask children too. I see people asking small children, "What do you want to eat?" But when you were small, were you asked what you wanted to eat, or were you asked what you wanted to wear? I mean, I don't remember any of that as a child, but this is a reality today. And how many decisions do we take every day? And on average, 35,000, according to research. And every decision that we make, every decision we take generates cortisol, stress in the body. So the more decisions we have, the more tension we feel. From my point of view, my ignorant point of view, I say, ask a child right from the beginning, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Is something negative. But instead, we live in a society where wanting is an acquired right. I have the right to get what I want and not what I need. So with this culture of wanting, with this worldview that to be happy, I need to be able to get what I want and avoid what I don't want. This is the basis of the quantity of things that we buy and the level of abuse, let's say, for our resources. And I have set an objective, and my objective is that the day that I die, it's important for me to have used up, to have used from nature at least as much as I have given. Very difficult. Let's do the math here. We who are born, and we use up 1,000 times more of what we give, and I'm being generous with that. I think it's much more. And where are we going to end up? I ask myself. These are incredibly finite resources. It's not for nothing that there are people There are people actually who think about taking resources from the moon, because we go to the supermarket and we take everything that we want. We don't have this idea about where these resources come from and where what we leave, where that will go. So we have this strong illusion, about being happy requires getting what we want when we want. I don't think that what we want is necessarily the best thing for us. So here we have two filters, two worldviews. One is that we are no longer a part of nature. We've distanced ourselves. So resources, even the word itself, resource, the earth, minerals, the plants, these are natural resources, right? We use this term. What does the word resource mean? It means that they're at our disposal. Obviously, someone could say, well, you're hypocritical because you talk about this, but you buy shoes, you drive a car. Of course, we live in this world where there's all of this, but let's try to have a minimum of awareness. And a responsible thing to do is understanding that I need to do what I need and not always what I want. Because this worldview where what I want is an acquired view and I need to get what I want brings with it a very big problem, which is the more I have, the more I want. This means that as we're able to obtain what we get, we need to get more and more and more to be able to get what we want. And what happens when we're not able to get what we want because what we can get is not enough? We are depressed. Why? When we're able to get what we want, what happens within? What's the feeling that we have? Pleasure, right? Oh, that moment of particular joy. Oh, we eat something good, or we're able to have something material that we like, whatever it is, clothes or shoes or car or boat, whatever it is, whatever that you like. We're able to get that thing. And when we're able to get what we want, or compliment, so we get this pleasure. And when we obtain this pleasure, we have this feeling of pleasure that is translated chemically in our brain into dopamine. This sensation of pleasure that we have, I'm talking about on a subjective level, observing ourselves when we get what we want, that sensation of pleasure, is that something that lasts over time? Or after a while fades away? Would be wonderful. Well, I don't know. It depends on the point of view. Oh, I feel a great pleasure, and we remain in that state of bliss. Oh, how wonderful this pleasure, and one stays in that state of satisfaction and pleasure. What would happen if it were like that? We'd all be dead. You eat just once. No? Actually, these are mechanisms, or survival mechanisms, actually, but having our survival that are assured, but those mechanisms remain, and if we don't manage those survival mechanisms well, they really work against us. When there was COVID, for example, it was an emergency. Why? Because we're attached to human life. And many, many people were dying. How much importance did we give to this emergency? We were also open to making big changes. And it was difficult because there was this imminent danger. Today we're living an epidemic that is even worse than COVID. Is there anyone here who doesn't know someone, who living or dead, does anyone know anyone living or dead who didn't at some point have cancer? In Holland, according to the numbers they gave me, they say that 50% of the population will be diagnosed at least once with a tumor. And in Italy, I can't remember where women are which was for men or which was for women, but it was 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 in their lifetime diagnosed with tumor. So we're living in an epidemic of cancer for sure. I don't know very well in Italy, but according to the numbers that I was told, more than 65% of the costs of the health system go to treating cancer patients. Just to talk about the amount of energy that is invested. But where does cancer come from? But you know that only 10% of cancer is genetic, and instead, our lifestyle, our life choices, is a major cause, and of course, environment, and then social causes. And from what I've understood, chronic inflammation is one of the main causes of tumors, like stress. Chronic stress generates inflammation. Now, why is it so hard to change our habits? I ask myself, change the way we eat, change the way we think. And here we have two challenges, and I think they're the two main challenges in our lifetime. Two fundamental challenges. The challenge of avoiding what we like but that's bad for us, and doing what we don't like but that's good for us. You need a lot of courage. But at least for me, I see a correlation between the difficulty of doing what we don't like but is good for us, and the difficulty of avoiding what we don't like but that's good for us, and avoiding to do what we like, but that's bad for us. And I see the correlation between this and this right that we think that we had. And I think it makes me think about when I was in India with my master Ken Lakpala, and I would say, I want this, I want that. And he would be like, what? As if he didn't understand. And at a certain point, he would say, and I say, I need. He's okay, you need. That's okay. And this was very apparent when I was restructuring the house where I was living. For example, I wanted to restructure the bathroom. There was no shower. There was only a bucket. And so I put in a shower. And then there was the problem that the dirty water, there was a tiny little tube, not even a drain, and then it would go onto the courtyard below. And so, and then I added a little shower with some tile. And I thought, well, if I restructure my bathroom, then it seemed strange to not redo the other two bathrooms in the house. So we did that. In Brazil, there's this name, Jackie. It says when you're doing restructuring, you have to be careful. Be careful to not invite Jackie, because I say, well, Jackie's doing this, so it's like saying, well, as I'm doing this, I should also do that. For example, in the kitchen, and we had a table for 8 people, but only 4 could sit there because two of the legs were broken and it had to rest against the table. And I said, let's change the table. I told Gen Lakpala, and he said, why? Yeah, I said, because it's broken. And he said, but it doesn't work? And he said, it works for 4. And he said, well, how often are we more than 4? About 3 or 4 times a year. And he says, what do we do normally? I know we go into your room. He had a big room with like 3 beds against the wall, and then little tables, Tibetan style, a bit like this, and we sit there. And he said, and we're comfortable, aren't we? And I said, yes. And he said, so why do we need another table? Okay, so we never changed the table. And then I went into the kitchen. And I said, let's change this and the sink of the kitchen. We really need. They put a tiny bathroom sink in the kitchen, and you couldn't even. Actually, I put in a normal inox sink, I started changing this, that, and the other. And then one day I saw that the walls weren't really straight. And I saw that the windows above, every time that it rained it rained heavily, it would drip, especially during the monsoon season. Okay, there were periods of dripping. So let's change the windows. And one day, talking to Ken Lakpa, I said, I want to do this, that, and the other. And he looked at me and he said, listen, what you think is really a need, I'll do everything in my power to help you. We go together to buy what's necessary. We'll do it together. But remember something, that desire has no end. And in that moment, I really was able to see that I had gotten into some kind of vortex. And I thought, because if I do this, then I'll need to do that, and then I'll need to this. And I started creating a tremendous amount of needs that before I didn't have. And those needs started creating a level of anxiety and dissatisfaction that I didn't have before. I don't know if that's clear. And there I did something. And today I'm happy about this. So once I decided, okay, let's finish, finish what the essential, and then I made a wardrobe. I made a kind of wardrobe, and I wanted to leave something unfinished. And I think that when you do a restructuring, a renovation, this happens naturally. But here I wanted to do it. I did it on purpose to remember that we never end. We never end. And from that teaching that I received from Gen Lakpala, which was fundamental, which is I was happier when I had less, and I was satisfied with what I had, compared to when I opened my mind to wanting more and comparing and wanting this and that, and I started creating needs that were unreal. So one key is asking ourselves with sincerity, do I need this, or is this just a desire? And this we add up to something else. I just try to explain it in a simple way. One day, also with Gen Lakpala, Gen Lakpala only once gave me a formal teaching, which was on the four seals. And all the other teachings I received from him by living with him. He took care of me like a father. And I remember one day, I don't remember what it was, I told him, I want to buy this. And even if it's not, I don't know how much, it's not like I had so much money, but you compare a Westerner in an Indian monastery 25 years ago, what I had in the village of the village of the village. So I said, I want to buy this. And Gen Lakpala said to me, okay, but remember something. When you buy something, you're using up money, right? But you're not using up only money. And let me explain better before I tell you what he did, just to give you the culture of the basis. There's something called karma. And the law of karma is the fact that there is no result without having created causes. And all actions, sooner or later, are going to give results. It's simple. Interaction, transformation, result. And there's a fundamental difference between cause and condition. The condition is like water and the sun, and the cause is the actual planted seed. The cause comes from the past, and the condition is in the present moment. Many sicknesses show up through a condition, but are caused from something that came previously. You say something, I get upset, I'm angry, but that cause of my anger was from some previous trauma, some previous experience. So what happens is, so the condition is what happens in that present, and the cause comes from the past. And they're connected like this inertia that creates this force, these karmic forces. The causes of the past are like an inertia, which is waiting for a condition so that it can show up. For example, I take this stick and I throw it. The cause is that moment of throwing. But once I've opened my hand and I've thrown it, the action is finished. But that stick keeps flying, and what pushes it to keep going is that karmic force. At certain point, even that stick just falls or it meets something else. Let's imagine that we throw this stick where there's no, there can be the within, if we throw this stick in space, it will just go on and on and on and on until it meets an obstacle. Here, instead, it will, with our atmosphere, it will fall or hit someone in the head. So what happens is, so it has attrition. So every action or thought or word spoken, this is a stick thrown. No? And then we add these. Maybe one of these evenings we'll talk about karma from beginning to the end. But the point is that there are karmic forces, and these karmic forces show up in our presence. We experience the result of karmic force through our sensation. So karmic force that shows up as a result in an experience in the present, and we experience we experience it through our sensation, pleasurable, unpleasant, or neutral. All actions that once they're finished and they generate this karmic force, that once they show their results and you experience them through a pleasurable sensation, those are called positive actions. All actions that once they come to fruition through a negative sensation, those are called negative actions. And neutral. The very real problem that we have is that once we do something, we don't know what the result will actually be. So let's just imagine that within us we have these forces of positive, negative, and neutral actions, the karmic force. Every time I feel some kind of suffering, does that depend only on the present condition, or does it depend also on a past cause? Obviously, it depends on a past cause. What's interesting is that once I throw a stick and it hits something, that object, that attrition, uses up that force that made it go, right? It absorbs that force. It uses it up. And similarly, when we live a result of our past actions through our sensation, that uses up our karmic force. So every time we have a feeling of suffering, we're diminishing the negative karmic forces that we have. And every time we have a pleasant feeling, we are diminishing also our positive karmic forces. Let me just on a side note, and we'll talk about this more in detail in the future, but it's not by suffering that we purify. So we said, I want to purify my negative karma. I'll just start hitting myself. No, the concept of purification is totally different. But what's the real problem with this system? When I receive a result of suffering, normally, what's our tendency? How do we react to that sensation of suffering normally? With love and compassion, gratitude, respect, awareness, patience. Normally, we act with anger, resentment, dissatisfaction, aggression, or some kind of form of violence mostly. So what kind of energy have we developed with that action? Another negative one. It's like taking out a loan to pay out a loan. So when I take out a loan to pay a loan, I am paying off that first loan, but I have another debt. And when we have a pleasant feeling, what's our normally, how do we react with, or we have something pleasurable. Are we feeling loving and generous? No, often it's the I and the mind. We're feeling selfish and we want it for ourselves. So ideally, when we have a negative sensation, we shouldn't react with negative, with a negative mind. And when we have a positive sensation, the result of some positive karma, we should have another positive mind to use well, like economize our positive karma. Getting back to the story with Kendlakpalam. So to have a pleasant feeling, I've used up money, but once, if I buy something and I have money to buy it, I've used up money. But if I'm buying a kind of pleasure, I'm also using up positive karma. And there's nothing wrong with using up negative. There's nothing wrong with using up positive karma. We shouldn't feel guilty about pleasures. But if I use it up in a chronic way without creating new positive karmic seeds, then if I'm using without sharing, I'm thinking about the I and the mind and my pleasures, and I get into this kind of loop. And so he said to me, when you spend money, you're not using just money. When you buy something, you're using also karmic seeds. You're reinforcing habits. You're using up resources from the planet. All of these things, right? For example, it's not right to call it banal as an example. What is the healthiest food? Natural, so-called natural food, or processed food, or super processed, the fast food. Is processed food good? No. Then why is more than 70% of why is more than 70% of what is in the supermarket super processed food? And in Italy, it's there's less compared to other countries. So when I buy some super processed food, I'm using up my health, but I'm also reinforcing a social dynamic. I'm reinforcing a market. I'm reinforcing this idea. Okay? And I don't think that we need to be radical and go against anyone. I think that we need to live coherently with what we believe. And it's not always easy. So, when we interact, when we buy, we're not spending only money, but there's karmic energy that we're using up. And for me, sincerely speaking, to use up my positive karma that I created with so much effort, and to use them up for banal things. Of course, there are also a couple of tricks. We can dedicate to others. We offer. And then you really enjoy. This winter, we'll go over the Lojong teachings again in Albagnano. But there's a practice that's very easy. Every time that we have a feeling of pleasure, drinking water or seeing something beautiful, meeting someone we like, whatever this pleasure is, in that moment of pleasure, if we allow ourselves to connect to others and we say to ourselves, may all beings enjoy this pleasure that I am experiencing. So we dedicate to others what we're living. And the more pleasures we have, the more we can dedicate to others. And when it's a sensation of suffering instead, I have a headache, for example, I think, may everyone who has this of sensation similar to mine, through the taking care of my headache, may everyone with a similar pain be also healed. By healing my headache, may everyone with a headache be healed. I'm not saying that I want their headache to fall onto me or that I'm healing their headache. No, I'm saying I want my headache to go and I want everyone's headache to go. And if we do these two things, every pleasure is an opportunity to reinforce altruism, and every moment of difficulty is also an opportunity to transform the adverse adverse situations into the path. Because normally when we have a pleasurable sensation, it reinforces our selfishness. And when we have a moment of suffering, it's also, we're thinking only of ourselves. But it's not that hard to invert this mind. To say there's nothing wrong with having pleasures, but we need to be a little sly about it. And the way we do it. So we started today from a very simple point. It's something we talked about many times, but there are many details, there are many levels. Then we took just a very small part. When we talked about the filters that form our worldview, that we inherit from a social cultural context, that comes also from our history, the history of our ancestors. To understand the present, we really need to study the past. And to understand our present, studying history helps to understand where we came from. And it's wonderful that when we recognize, oh, I used to see this like this because there was this filter. Or I see this because there's this filter, but I can change it. I mean, at a certain point there was a function, but we don't have that same function anymore, but we keep it. We're in a moment where it's important for us to go back to the awareness that we are part of nature. For example, in some indigenous tribes, they eat meat. Most of them do, but they have a tremendous amount of respect towards the animals. They respect the animals like them the way they respect each other. For example, they hunt, but the idea of breeding and raising cattle or chickens or hens was crazy. I mean, for them it would be like us saying, okay, my pet dog is for lunch tomorrow. No, when you go and hunt, there's a tremendous amount of respect for the animal, and don't waste any food. in this sense of superiority that we have, this idea that we own, we waste, we don't care how it comes to us. The both vegetable resources, animal resources, mineral resources, water. When I see the climatic problems that we're living, and I ask myself, how am I involved in all of this? And the question I ask myself sincerely is, the way I live in the world and the choices I make, am I more part of the solution or the problem? And the answer is not that easy. I want to be part of the solution. It's important for me to be part of the solution. But sometimes I have doubts if I'm really able. Some part yes, some parts no. It's 100%. It's difficult, but this is something important. Changes are never from 100 from 0 to 100. They're gradual. So in my life, for this and that, I'm able to be part of the solution. So I set an objective to manage, but remember that every interaction brings a transformation. So the way I live, is it coherent with the way I want to live? Question. Not yes or no. It'll be many, many yeses and many, many no's. I mean, the way I eat, for example, the way I move, the way I dress, the way I interact, the view that I have, and little by little try to gradually transform and be part of the solution. And a fundamental point to be part of the solution is to eliminate the attitude of indifference towards others or the environment or others or society, because one of the great evils that we're living today, I mean, we have this strong habit of individualism that shows up as indifference towards others, unless that other has something to do with me. I don't know if I'm explaining myself. And here we need to go beyond that. So in my daily life, am I part of the solution, or am I part of the problem or the solution? When I see all the indifferences, when I look at the wars, the problems related to the environment, and just one point more that I want to touch on. When we see all of it, I'm going to be very short. When we see all of this in a general way, I mean, who can be optimistic? Who's able to be optimistic? It's difficult. Before we talked about cancer, but if everyone's going to get cancer, I mean, what possibility do I have? This is the way it is. Or the world is now like this. And what happens is the following. Very often we ask ourselves what the cause is. I mean, why is this like this? And in reality, the reality is it's not possible to find an answer. So global warming, what's the cause? And there are the causes, but not one cause. And when we go and look at the causes, there are so many. on so many levels. And what's crazy is that every small things creates a result, an enormous result. And if it weren't for those small things, that enormous result wouldn't be there. Like a very complex equation needs all the small numbers. Because if we made up an equation with all of you present, and at a certain point someone changed the number that they wanted to add to the equation, then our result would be different. But for example, let's not take into consideration decimal points. Then it's obvious that of any very small action and any small aspect changes the result. So we're part of this society, right? So every small action that we take has an influence on society. Every interaction inevitably brings a transformation, but we have a very nearsighted view of everything. And we're not looking at the decimal points. But the good news is that everything we do towards a healthier lifestyle or healthier world, it pushes the worldview in a positive way. Because the worldview today is the fruit of all of these, all of the thoughts of everyone. For example, when I was doing the project for the temple in Albagnano, I was projecting something, and I had a problem. It's that the spaces for the bathrooms were very small, and there wasn't a lot of room, and for the reason I wasn't able to find a solution to have bathrooms for men and for women. And so I said, well, let's just make one unisex bathroom. What's the problem? And a few days ago, I got a message saying someone went into Google Maps and wrote something about the center. And every once in a while I see. And I was curious. And I see. And it says, it said that we could write in Google, we have like gender neutral bathrooms. Yeah, so Google offers this possibility that we can show that we're so modern. We have gender neutral bathrooms, and it wasn't. I didn't do that with this awareness, but certainly for that function, have a gender neutral bathrooms. So the point is that with just very small changes make a big difference. And what next time we'll talk about the formal decision we've taken to get out of social media. Last week, someone from Brazil, so we had a meeting in Brazil. So for personal use, I have gotten out of social media platforms. And someone on the phone, someone told me that they also did the same, and they able, in just 1 week, they used their telephone 25% less, and they were able to pick up a book, and they sleep better. I mean, it's just a very small action. Just so to conclude, we need to have courage, strength, and determination to face these two challenges. Cultivate that which is good for us, even if it's tiresome and difficult, and abandon that what's bad for us, even if it's pleasurable. To cultivate a lifestyle that is healthy, physically, mentally, socially, and from an environmental point of view and a relationship point of view, because because and that 25% of the 25% of choices related to our lifestyle that could lead to having a tumor or not, it's difficult because it depends. It has to do with these two challenges, and 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 I add to that, one of the lifestyle choices has to do with refined sugar. But it's important to see that changes happen. Changes happen, and they're made with small choices. We should really be full of faith, because everything we do is never in vain. The choices we make for ourselves, the choices we make for society, for the environment. It's time for our dedications. At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. And now, very briefly, let's do a prayer dedicated to all those who have left their body. There's people close to me, an old person who's an older person, and also a dog. So time for a prayer. At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Tashidele. And see you next week. Thank you, everyone.